Simon Porter, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Fellas.
How we doing?
Good, thank you.
I feel like your circle of friends and contacts have been waiting for an opportunity to talk to some podcast hosts about you. We've got some pretty good stuff. How are you feeling about today?
Reasonably anxious, I think it'd be fair to say. Didn't have a 21st, so maybe it's payback from, from that. Yeah,
no 21st.
Issues between Dunedin, Napier, working in Wellington and rugby commitments and stuff like that. So didn't happen.
All right. In the first email you sent me after we asked you to come on, you said you'd spent your life and career in the shadows, which is where you think an agent should be. But you've agreed to step out of the shadows today. I wanted to start with asking why.
Genuinely, I think that when you get offered an opportunity to do something that might put you out of your comfort zone, or that other people may not get the opportunity to do, you should do it, right? Like, you've got to be uncomfortable sometimes, and it's not many people get the privilege of doing this, as a couple of my mates have reminded me, as I've maybe had some buyer's regret. So yeah, like, why not, I suppose.
Yeah, it's quite a unique space, this. You come in and we're going to unpack your life and some of the best and most interesting parts. But has it made you reflect coming in? Like, have you been thinking about what we might ask?
I have been trying to remember certain things that might come up. But no, honestly, I haven't tried too hard. We'll just have a yarn and we'll see where it goes and we'll react to what gets thrown at me, I suppose.
I think, full disclosure, I need to get this out early. I was an aspiring agent at one point in my life.
Have we shut the door on that, have we?
Well, I don't know. We'll see how after this chat how this chat goes. But this is I'm so interested in your world and the world of the shadows that you say that you operate in. I think it's going to be a real fascinating. I won't say expose, because I'm sure there's stuff you can't talk about, but an interesting look into what you do and how you do it and why you do it as well.
I didn't ignore an email from you asking for a job.
No. That was
There's no payback.
That was Ken Howell.
Right, okay.
No, he was very good. He was very generous with his time as well. I just realised I don't think I'm cut out in the hard negotiation side of it.
Well, we might see by the end of this.
Okay, so we're keen to start with an overview. So you're the boss of Halo Sport, and along with Warren Alcock, lead the best and biggest sports agency and management team in New Zealand. On your books are, and these are just a few of them, Stephen Adams, Razor, Richie McCaw, Dan Carter, Sophie Pascoe, Ian Foster, Bowden Barrett, Val Adams, Jimmy McCaw, Willie Apiata. You've got everyone. And that's, like I say, that's a shortened list. And we've got a lot of questions, so we figure we're just going to rifle through them. So, okay, first one is, Razor's negotiating his contract as the new All Blacks coach. What is your role?
Well, me specifically, probably not a heck of a lot other than talking to Warren Alcock. So we have a team philosophy at Halo, I suppose, and we have kind of different people do different things, so kind of get your specialisms or whatever. So Warren's role really is to negotiate, or if I did Leon McDonald's, say, assistant coach contract. You are literally just negotiating with the New Zealand Rugby Union around the terms and conditions of the contract. You're also dealing with your client around, do you want to do this? What are some of the things that, you'd want to see, or, what are the important things to you? And you really just have to take them on a journey, in terms of making sure that they're really committed to the job. And I guess that's probably leaping into how you do it with anyone, but it's, you are trying to find information first and foremost, and really testing them in their decision making, and then you're negotiating as hard as you can to get the best deal that you can in that situation, and that's not always money. Like, often it's the terms and conditions. It's all the extras that come with it. It might be sabbaticals, it might be time off, it might be support in one area of your life that you think might be affected if you take this job, or something like that. So there's just a whole range of different things that you have to go through.
And so it's kind of like a team effort, right? So Warren does the contract and you're more in the sort of international space as soon as they're looking at something overseas?
Yeah, so we have we've kind of always sort of set it up that way. So, you'll have your domestic clients. So I've always had a raft of domestic clients as well. And then, Warren and Henry and Kent and Joe and Dale, etc., will have their, their domestic clients. And then, because overseas is a little bit more specialist, and I think probably because Warren didn't like working around the clock in time zones all around the world, we kind of did it so that if somebody wanted to go overseas, there was one person, because you can't talk to every rugby club in the world. It's just not conceivable. So what you really need to do is have partnerships or, offices around the world working in their markets who are talking to those people. So you're kind of like the sand, the middle of the hourglass, the information's coming in and then you're processing the information and giving it out. So, so that was sort of my speciality, I suppose, was doing the overseas deals. So talking to the guys in France, talking to the guys in UK, talking to the guys in Japan. Warren would be negotiating a New Zealand deal if it was someone who's got, who's looking at potentially staying but maybe going, and then Warren and I are just working together, trading notes, working out how to play it sometimes, and then the sitting down with the player and their family or their support network or whoever it is, and helping them make the best decision, because it is complicated. Going overseas, you got tax, you got just living arrangements, you've got like the contracts never really line up because we play in different windows from hemispheres, and are you going to be able to stay and play for the Māori All Blacks, or are you going to have to try to get out early? And there's just all those sort of little specialities, overseas player rules, like how many restrictions there are on how many overseas players can be in each team and all that sort of stuff. So it is really quite specialist. So we've always kind of tried to divide the labour up that way.
I've just spent a little bit of time in New Caledonia and Tahiti, and this is completely off topic, but
come on, man, tell us about your holiday.
No, well, when you're negotiating with a French club, for example, do you speak French?
No.
Yeah. So do you ever find yourself in a trap of speaking English in a French accent to try and get your point across? Have you slipped into that?
Yeah, look, you do sometimes. Just
to make them understand, right?
Yeah, and I, my mother taught French at school,
wow.
And they made me do Japanese, and I gave up Japanese as quick as I could, and I never bothered to learn French because I was like, why on earth would I need French or Japanese? And now I run a business in France and Japan. So that's one thing I've often reflected on in the past, is like, gosh, if I'd only been more of a linguist and actually taken advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, I reckon I'd be a disaster in those things. Yeah, if you want the player, then we need to meet the terms.
It plays.
Yeah. I reckon I would.
The thing, there's a lot that caught my eye when we started researching you, but one of them was that you represent Fozzie and Razor.
Yep.
So when the All Black coaching stuff was going on, you know everything. You guys know everything.
Yep.
Like you've got all the information. Are you ever put in a compromised position where you kind of need to be serving your client, but you know what's happening on the other side, and that can work its way into your thinking?
Yep. Like there's, I think the reality is New Zealand's a small place. The industry is tiny. So you do have instances where you have conflicts of interest. And, that's probably a pretty good example of one. But conflicts of interest, you declare them, you be open, and if people are okay with it, then, you just have to be really careful with what you share and how often you share it. With just basically what you share, and as long as everyone's aware of it, it's okay. But I think particularly with New Zealand rugby, and I guess it's anywhere, we're not the decision maker, right? Like we are not petitioning Mark Robinson around who should be the All Black coach, or we're not petitioning people who should be the coach of the Hurricanes or the Blues or whatever. They are running their process, and in New Zealand those processes are pretty full on. You've got to do presentations and interviews, and there's lots of people involved and all that sort of stuff. So when you are really just negotiating a contract, I think those conflicts are pretty manageable, And so long as you declare them and you work with them, it doesn't mean that you don't feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes, because you'd be lying if you said you didn't. But you just have to work through it and be as honest and transparent as you can be. And none of that's new. Like, we've been doing this for a long time. And, I think the proof's in the pudding a little bit with that. Like, if we hadn't have managed those conflicts the way we had, we wouldn't still be doing what we're doing. So I think that we've, found a way to navigate our way through those sort of choppy oceans, I suppose.
You say you've been doing this a long time, and you have. Where did it all begin? How did it all start?
I'm a Hawke's Bay boy, bleed black and white. Grew up went Napier Boys High School, and kind of always wanted to be a lawyer. Like, that was I just remember wanting to be a lawyer. Don't really like my vision of a lawyer back there was kind of a cross between LA law and sitting in a room, probably a little bit like this, and little old ladies coming in with a problem and you helping them. Like, generally, I just thought lawyers helped people solve problems, that sort of stuff, and so that was always attractive to me. So I bailed off, followed the well-trodden path down to Dunedin to go to the University of Otago, and that was in '96, which is the year rugby went professional. The Warriors had started in '95, I think. So any thought of being an agent or anything like that, like, there was just none of that. I just wanted to be a lawyer, so I set off. I did law school. And then I'd summer clerked at Bell Gully in Wellington. And then I was just at the rugby club one day. I was playing Premier Rugby for the Dunedin Sharks down there. And Warren Alcock just hit me up, just at the bar. And his story might be different, but he tapped me on the shoulder and basically said, "What are you doing next year? Can I buy you a beer?" And, we had a few beers and at the club, and I agreed to go in and meet him in at the law firm. And he sort of just kind of explained what he did. So this is in '99. So, 96, 97, 98, it's only sort of 4 years into it. And, offered me a job, sort of first law job out of school was working with him. So it was more doing sort of sports law. And so I'd draft contracts with Otago Rugby Union, or I'd kind of, help Warren with whatever was going on. But it was kind of, because when rugby went professional in '96, there was kind of like a massive lolly scramble, and everyone tried to grab hold of their players. So it probably wasn't until that sort of, 98, 99, 2000 that everyone had sort of got their ducks in a row, and the dust had settled. There was a competition in England, there was a competition in France, there was a competition in Japan, and then it sort of started opening up a little bit, and the whole foreign player thing came into it, and, well, let's get foreign players to come and play for us, because now we can pay people to come and play for us on a much grander scale. That was happening the whole time, right? Brown paper bags and all that sort of stuff. So, and that's kind of when all that sort of started. So I was just working for Warren. I was doing lots of other law as well. And my rugby was starting to go, well, okay for me back then, playing a bit of, I sort of came out of the age groups with Otago and played a bit for North Otago, and then went up to counties and went overseas and played lower league union over in England, and I was kind of deciding what to do. I had an offer to play rugby for Exeter, who were second div back then. My wife, who was a Black Fern, wanted to come home at some point because she was trying to ramp up for a World Cup. And I applied for a job with a competitor, actually, and I got back to home or the office in England, and had this message string, Warren Alcock, urgently. And I'm like, oh, God, someone's died or, something. So, or have I fucked something up from a case ages ago so what's going wrong? And he's just like, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, why have you applied for them? There's a job in London, go and meet Bart Campbell, and there's a job for you there if you want it. So went up to London, and they offered me a job to be a full-time agent in England, and I ran around having absolutely no idea what I was doing, and here I am 20 years later, still doing the same thing.
So as part of this reflection, for those that don't know, Warren is the GOAT, right?
Yoda.
I heard you describe him as Yoda.
He is Yoda. So that chance meeting where you have 8 pints in the pub and he sort of takes you under his wing, like that, is that the reason that you are where you are today? Because you linked up with the great man?
Absolutely. It had never even sort of crossed my mind back in, like, it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't an industry. It wasn't anything. And that moment, those 8 spates at the Dunedin Sharks club rooms sort of set me off on a path. And he offered me less than half the pay I was getting in Wellington and all that. But it just was something that, you're like, wow, I love sport. Like, sport's just, I grew up playing anything I could, watching, devouring anything I could. And I loved, law. I loved studying law. I still think of myself as a lawyer. The opportunity to combine those was just, too good opportunity to refuse, really.
We're going to talk about you soon, but can we just talk about Warren for a minute? Tell us about the scope of what he's done over the 30 years and all the contracts he's written, and tell us about Warren.
So when rugby went professional, the rugby wars and the Murdoch and all that sort of stuff, he was just a bit Johnny on the spot, I suppose, in that he was a partner of a law firm. I think he was partnered down there, and he was mates with the Jamie Josephs and the Josh Kronfelds and the Adam Pennays and all those kind of guys. And, Warren is, he's Yoda. Like, I mean, that just explains him pretty well. He's always been old to me. He's still not that old now, but even when I was young, that wise old koru that just doesn't say a lot, but is really meaningful and, really loyal and trusting. And it's just, he was the right person at the right time to sort of help, navigate those waters of where rugby could have gone had it gone professional in New Zealand rugby. So he started, along with David Jones and David Howman, who kind of were they're the Mount Rushmore of the industry, I suppose, in New Zealand rugby, because they were the ones that sort of cornered the market and helped everyone make those decisions early on. And from there, Warren's just, David and Dodge have gone on and done other things, and Warren's just stayed in the industry. I mean, it's just, he's done it all other than probably jump on a conference call at 11 o'clock with a French club, because he didn't want to do that, so he got some other muppet to do it for him. But he's, All Black coaches, All Black players. I mean, he'll have a tally somewhere. He'll never tell you, but he'll have a tally of the number of All Blacks he's represented, All Black coaches. Very humble, but I know it means a lot to him, and he's just the GOAT. It's literally hard to. He's just done it all.
How old were you when he sided up next to you in Dunedin Sharks Footy Club?
I was over the age of consent, but that's what you're on. 21, I think 21.
So early 20s is a pretty impressionable time.
Yep.
Are there any lessons in those very formative years that have stuck with you all the way till now?
Yep.
Like, is there any knowledge that he imparted on you?
Yep.
And can you share that with?
No, absolutely. And it actually was more. I was doing a criminal case. I think a player had probably got in some. Well, he had actually. Now I remember, had got into some trouble, driving issues, and dealing with the police and this. And he was just like, mate, you never want to deal in favours in this game. Never get yourself caught where you're dealing in favours, because if you do a favour for someone, then someone's going to want a favour back. And when you're in the service industry and you're representing players, and rugby is, it is a volume game, because it's not soccer where you get Mbappe or you get LeBron and basketball, and you need a lot of clients to make a business out of it. But you can't trade a favour for one player or one client for a favour for another. Like, you just can't. And, I know that probably drives people crazy who we have to negotiate with and all that sort of stuff. But you can't choose your battles when you're representing someone. And I think, particularly as a lawyer, that's our training. And you are very much their spokesperson, their voice. You're taking instructions from them on what they want. You don't get to choose. Like, if they want to push harder, you don't get to say, oh, well, mate, they actually paid that guy a little bit more last time, so just take a back seat. You can't. You are full throttle every single negotiation because that's what your client absolutely deserves. So as soon as you get into favours, same with the media, can we chat off the record? Whatever? No, like it's confidential. It's not my information to give you, But so that is probably the biggest one that that runs courses through me all the time. You can't trade in favours. And another big one from very early on was Warren Gatlin actually told me you only have one reputation in this game. Once it's gone, it's gone. So, be careful with your reputation. So, yeah, that's good advice. That comes back quite a lot as well. So
is Warren? So I saw the Stephen Adams on the website, right? That's $50 million deals. Is that Warren?
No, unfortunately not. No. So that's it is Warren in that Warren has the relationship with Stephen. But what we do with Stephen is commercial stuff. So any of his commercial rights down in New Zealand, and a lot through his basketball camps that he does. So a lot with the
Meadow Fresh.
Yeah, I think they're a sponsor. Yep. The foundation and the people that run that Steve's obviously part of. So that's kind of how we, work in with Stephen.
Yeah. So if Stephen Adams wants to come on Between Two Beers podcast to do some stuff with us.
Absolutely. Call Warren every day for the next year. See if you can get him on.
So presumably then Stephen Adams would have his own Jerry Maguire kind of a situation in the USA.
Yeah, he's probably more an entourage, I think, actually. He has his agent who does his basketball deals, but then he has a business manager that sort of pulls everything together. I mean, those sports are just out the gate, right? Like I often tell, rugby players, you got to think about this like you're a CEO of a company, like you've got to have your accounting in order, you've got to have your finances in order, you've got to have all that sort of stuff, you're your own business, you've got to run it. You take that to the next level with the amount of money that those guys are earning over there, and you think about the tax structuring, just, where you're going to be resident with all the different state laws in America and all that sort of stuff. It's big business, and then throw in the endorsements and all that juggle. It's just a completely different ball.
So what you're telling me is Ballers, the show with Dwayne Johnson, is very different to your day-to-day, because this has an impact on my potential decision to get in as an agent or not.
I genuinely think that even Jerry Maguire, like the only thing that's relevant is probably the credits at the end where you're just reading a whole lot of small print. That's probably the only relevant thing in that. Our job is a lot less interesting than a lot of people actually.
How common is that sort of a
really common? But you're just looking at it from the outside, and that's fine. And all jobs like that. There's plenty of jobs that you probably sit there and go, "Wow, that'd be awesome." But I think most careers are a bit like that, aren't they? There's all you're really trying to do is enjoy as much of it as you can. Like, work is inconvenient. That's why you get paid to do it. Like that's part and parcel of it. So, look, there's plenty of good bits. There's plenty of perks, but it's not Jerry Maguire. It's not Ballers. It's not for us anyway.
Do you watch that stuff though?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just go over to the States and try that.
Yeah. Maybe. Probably not quite my style, I don't think. But old. Maybe 15 years ago, possibly.
Yeah. I spent 30 minutes on the phone with Warren yesterday, and it was a great chat, but it sort of started off, quite serious, and by the end of it, he was throwing a bit of shade, and he talked about the competitive element of the business and the friendship and the bants going around. He reluctantly told me that you held the North Otago goal kicking record, which was recently beaten. Is this?
Oh, look, I hold a few records.
Okay.
No, yes, all I could do was goal kick, right? That's all I could do on the rugby field. And I actually got to witness at a reunion a guy breaking my record for the most points in a match for North Otago, which was great to be there and watch Benny McCarthy beat it. Yeah.
Were you knocking around when Eddie Hikanui was playing?
Yeah, I know Hicks, yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, down in Dunedin, and then...
Sorry, niche areas.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to take this one offline?
Eddie was a zingity boy, and then we played New Zealand Divisional 15.
Yeah, right.
Well, he played and I sat on the bench, and then he settled in Hawke's Bay. So I've seen him. I haven't seen him for a while, but yeah, no, I know Eddie really well. Yeah.
Did he wear gloves while he played?
I knew I was waiting for the gloves. Probably. Everyone did. And the thing about that, did Warren tell you about the gloves?
He did tell me about the gloves.
Well, he was a shareholder in Shock Top, and I was working for him, and they made the gloves. So he can beat it.
Were you one of the pioneers of the glove game?
Look, I was not a pioneer in anything I did in rugby. The guys that I idolised that were playing for Otago at the time wore them, so I followed and wore them, just like, any 21-year-old battler does, right? Like they set the trend and we do it. That's how it works.
Is that why you followed Andrew Mertens in his tackling style, according to Mel Robinson?
I actually think I was worse than him too.
Yeah, that was Mel's come in and she's given us a few bits and pieces, but one of them was, ask about your tackling technique.
Well, I don't have a technique because, I actually was very adept in getting into a position where you didn't have to tackle. I think that was the art back then, was just getting out of position so you couldn't quite make the tackle. Just pushing a little bit too far and making sure you had a very good 7 that would clean it up, or just not quite getting there. Yeah,
thinking,
there's a reason I'm an agent and not playing the game.
But I do wonder, are you a unicorn in that regard, in that you have the crossover from having played into the agency, or is that par for the... Because is there only 12, 13 accredited in New Zealand?
Yeah, there's not many. Although I hardly played, let's be honest. I
feel like you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, but I mean, Craig Innes, he's probably the one, and then Joe Wheeler, who works for us, who played. I mean, everyone else, I think most other people would have at least played Premier Rugby. Cass Leomanu played professionally. He's an agent. And everyone else would have at least played Premier Rugby, I think. I mean, everyone's clearly got a massive interest in it. It's not, you don't need to be a rugby player to do this. It's just...
But does that... Knowing some of the, I guess it's probably more when you're having conversations with younger players, having had skin in the playing side of the game, does that help guide some of those conversations?
Oh, I think so. Like a guy like Joey Wheeler, who's not so long out of the environment, absolutely. A guy like me, they wouldn't have any idea, and it's completely irrelevant really to them. But, you understand their training demands, you understand what they're going through. But you can learn that just from conversations with agents. Like, I don't think it's certainly not a prerequisite. It probably helps. There's lots of other things that I think make a better agent than having been out in the middle.
Like a good golf swing.
Great golf swing is very critical.
So I spoke to Warren and I was asking about, are the deals done in the pub? Is it kind of like, is that where the networking's done? He's like, no, it's on the golf course. And Warren said he's quite new to the game and it got him quite frustrated that you would always have these meetings on the golf course. But I did want to talk about that part of the job because it can be sold as work. You are developing relationships with
This is a very loaded angle that my friend on the right
4 years
here
on the
is.
course. But genuinely, how important has golf been to establishing relationships with your clients?
Well, the main one is what it's really helped is keeping my relationship with my wife after children so that I can play my golf during the week and not on the weekends.
Yeah.
That's the main one. But look, it's everyone's busy, right? Like, and everyone is busy all the time with your rugby player. And I think that's, a lot of people look at rugby players and say, oh, they've got an easy life, whatever. And they're busy, and they're tired and they're, they need to chill on the couch or sleep extra or get massages or whatever. And so, and we're no different, we're really busy and, the opportunity to go out in a beautiful setting, have some banter, hit a ball, maybe have a brew afterwards, that's, whether it's your mates or whether it's with work or whatever, there's just that bonding and that relationship that you can build with people. It's just a really, it's a nice little time. You don't have any distractions. You're not picking up the phone. Well, you shouldn't be picking up the phone. You shouldn't be doing emails. You shouldn't do whatever. You can cover a lot of ground and talk about things. So, yeah, I'm probably pretty. You could go on a bike ride with them, I suppose, but most guys want to play a bit of golf.
I guess you're so immune or normalised to celebrity that playing 18 with Dan Carter or Bowden Barrett or Damien McKenzie, that's just playing 18, right?
Yep. It is. Yeah, which probably. Yep, I agree. You are immune to it. Yep, but yeah, we that's that's part of I guess the perks in the job, and if that's where they want to catch up and that's what they're going to do, then who am I to say no?
Who's the best rugby player / golfer that you have played with?
Ooh.
Yeah, you got the Barrett brothers, Dan Carter, Izzy Dagg, Damien McKenzie, Aaron Smith.
Geordie is exceptional.
Is he?
Yeah.
Big long levers.
Yeah, he's scratched. Tom McCartney was very good, the Blues prop and hooker. The best sporting golfer I've played with is Mitchell Santner, hands down. Like, that guy is a freak. And play a few Cricket Players Association golf days or whatever, and he is hands down the best golfer, probably golfer I've seen.
Is it?
Well, outside of the pros that you play with, pro-ams and stuff. Yeah.
Do you get involved in the pro-am situation as well? You ever won a green jacket or anything like that? In a
PwC green jacket, 2 in a row. Back-to-back defending. University Rugby Club, Hamilton, Waikato University Rugby Club, green jacket, won in a boat race, actually. Yeah.
Very good.
I played a couple of pro-ams, but I don't know, not too much of it.
When I spoke to some of your sort of childhood friends, they mentioned this golf trip you go on every year, and there's 16 mates, and it's I love this stuff. Like, we've got a really good friend group, and the importance of like having something to look forward to, but also getting around your mates.
Yep.
I wondered with that what it's like for you, because you're obviously the guy that knows everything, and I'm assuming there are a lot of sporty guys. Are they all trying to get at you about sort of what's going on and what's the goss in the rugby land?
No, not really. I think, with that crew and with my good mates, sometimes, they might, but I think, everyone kind of knows that there's not a lot of point asking me because I'm not going to talk about it. And, and this is probably like the worst bit of the job, I suppose, is rugby is everywhere in this country, right? Like, it's just everyone's got an opinion on it, whether they like it or they don't. That's an opinion in itself, but it's just so sort of everywhere that it's really hard to get away from, and so that's something I've always kind of wrestled with, that when you're at the pub and your mates just want to talk about rugby, and I'm like, this is just work, or, like you're at home and you flick on and it's first 15 rugby on TV and you're like, oh, that's just work, like I don't actually want, like you find it hard to sort of relax. So the guys don't. They leave me alone. The ones they really like are when people get in trouble, right? Like they don't really care about anything else. They might ask about selections or whatever, but most of the, my good mates will they sort of know how to ask around it, or they probably recognise cues in me when I don't want to discuss something or something like that. And look, when we're playing golf on those golf tours, we've got plenty of other stuff to discuss anyway, so it's okay.
Yeah. I want to take you back to sort of foundational years. Whenever we get someone who's kind of risen to the top of their field, I love understanding where it came from. And after speaking to a bunch, like, his family's incredible. Your mother was a teacher, your father was a road engineer, your older sister was head girl at Napier, now a doctor. You were head boy at Napier, became a lawyer. Your younger bro was deputy head boy, now a road engineer. So the question at that is there a secret sauce? Is there anything you look back on growing up as this is the reason that we've all turned out so well?
My brother will kill me if I don't point out he's a fire engineer, but that's okay.
Oh, fire engineer.
That's all right. Look, and you don't realise it at the time, right? You don't realise when you're growing up just how sort of lucky we were. It's just when you're supposed to get emotional, but we had you see lots of people that have families that break up or whatever, that have two parents around. I always had two incredibly loving parents who would do anything for us and the family. And probably not until you work and you see how hard it is to give up your time to take your rugby team or take your cricket team or go away on the weekend or whatever, which you just took for granted when you're a kid. And so they were always there, for all of us to do anything we want, like living in Napier. It's not Auckland, it's pretty small. We spend a lot of time on the bike getting around, but they were always there to pick you up and carry on. But I sort of anticipated this question a little bit. And I think, I just remember a lot of questions when I was young, not really being told what to do, just asked if that was the right thing to do, or have you thought about this, or should you do it this way, or should you do it that way? Like we just got asked a lot of questions, and I just don't remember being told. So in some ways they were just making you learn, think through your decisions, think through what you're doing, could you have done it a different way, and all that sort of stuff. So that's what I really remember. And I think, like my siblings, we are completely different people, like each of them, like my sister's a pediatrician down in Christchurch. She's the one that does God's work, like saving kids' lives and that sort of stuff. Like that's phenomenal. And then my brother is a fire engineer that does he works for Home Solutions, which they sort of make really cool stuff or test stuff. And he runs a team, and he's done really well. But we are way, way, way different from each other, which is probably just a product of how mum and dad raised us to be different, to think for ourselves, to make our own decisions, and maybe not follow a path just because, like the only thing I remember my dad telling me to do, and I'm sure he told me lots of stuff, but the one that stands out is I wanted to go to Victoria, law school, and cricket was my thing at school, and I sort of wanted to come back and play cricket in Hawke's Bay, so couldn't go to Massey because they didn't have a law school. It's the closest one, and my sister was a year ahead of me at school, and she'd gone down to Dunedin to do pre-med, and they went down and visited her. And I remember my dad came back, so what do you think about varsity? I said, still think Victoria. And he just goes, I think you might want to think about Dunedin, son. And he goes, it's pretty fun down there. and I was like, all right, okay. So, all right, I'll think about it, Dad. Because I actually remember at the time going, man, he's never told me anything. And, okay, all right. Well,
and that's subtle, messaging.
Just real subtle messaging. Okay, yep. So off I went,
Well, I think it's testament to the values that they instilled in you, that to a person, everybody that we spoke to speaks about your moral compass and your genuine concern for people, regardless of whether they're clients or friends or people that you come across. Yep. So I think they did a wonderful, wonderful job with you.
Yeah, I often think, honestly, when I'm in situations or whatever, I think, what would mum say? What would my mum do? So, yeah.
The side of the job that people don't really know anything about your job, right? There's probably a dozen agents in New Zealand, less than that full time. So this is might be people's first insight into what it's really like. But I was hoping you could tell us about the Japan connection to your job and Dentsu and how big that is and how much of your time is actually spent over there.
Yep. So we were bought out. We were owned by an English company, CSM, up until about 2018, I think it was, and Dentsu, which is a massive publicly listed Japanese company, like, I don't know what it is, 4 billion market cap or something like that. You've got it there, have you?
I'm not sure if this stat is right, but I read that in 2022 they reported net revenue of $8.4 billion.
Yeah, that sounds probably. Is that Kiwi?
That was an overseas.
Bloody good question.
That'll be Kiwi because I have 4 in my head US.
USD,
So that's probably bang on right. So
huge.
They're huge, and they're just ginormous around the world and all that sort of stuff. So the reason for them buying us was that it was just before the Rugby World Cup was in Japan, and they wanted legacy, I suppose, around the World Cup and, well, what are we doing? And, there are ambitions around changing the competition and all that sort of stuff. So they bought us because Japan has kind of always been our engine, I suppose. We've been putting players up there since about 2002, I think. And so, we've got 8 staff up there. It's big business for us up there. So it was kind of natural that a Japanese company would want us, given our how much business we did in Japan. So, we have 8 staff, and we've got, lots of players up there and we broker deals for South African players and Australian players and UK players, and that it's not just the Kiwis, because we have those relationships I was talking about with other offices around the world. So I'm going there on Sunday. That'll be my 5th trip this year, but that's probably a little bit That's not particularly normal. Normally it'd be 3 or 4 trips a year to go up and see head office, but then also see the clubs and see some of the clients and just check on the staff and all that sort of stuff. But it's big business for us.
Huge business.
Yep.
And you're kind of that link man between New Zealand Rugby, the All Blacks, and that Japanese league that Dentsu is kind of runs.
And is it an exaggeration that you could pick up the phone and talk to literally anybody in the rugby world? From the chairman of World Rugby right through to a club admin.
There'd be relationships with every organisation that you. I mean, I can't speak Japanese. I can't speak French, but we're connected. And if it's a team thing, right? Like, so if it's not, if it's not me, and one important person you missed out was Hannah Hickling, who runs the brand side of our business. If one of Dean, Warren, Hannah, me, or someone in the organisation will have a contact somewhere. Yeah, mainly clubs, not so much unions. Unions kind of run their own sort of races. World Rugby are kind of we actually have no standing with World Rugby. If a player had an issue with World Rugby, we can't go. If we emailed World Rugby, they'd come back to us and say, "Sorry, you have no standing. We can't deal with you. You have to go through the union." Who would then have to, like our union, so New Zealand, or if it's Japan, and they would then have to go to World Rugby.
The scattergun nature of this interview means I'm just going to be throwing up random stuff because there's so many little different bits and pieces I'm really interested in. So the next place I'm going to go is managing the athletes and sort of transitioning like legendary All Blacks out of sport and into the next stage of their life.
Yep.
Like, what does that look like when Richie McCaw is hanging up the boots and thinking about what to do next? Like, what's your plan there?
When does that conversation even start?
Yeah. Well, like every relationship is different, right? To your point about when does it start? I mean, all rugby players, and this is a public service announcement, if they haven't figured it out yet, they are going to be redundant at some point. Their job is going to be made redundant, or because it's just a finite career. So generally, when they're young, bulletproof, they're into it and they've got years ahead of them in the game and stuff. So it's when they get a bit older, getting more towards the end of the career, they'll start saying, "Oh, look, I think I've only got 2 or 3 years left, or 2 or 3 contracts left in me, or whatever, and this is my plan, and this is what I want to do." We work with the Players Association, which is Rob Nicol and his team of people that work with him, professional development managers, and then they have a person whose sole role is to deal with the people overseas as well, to sort of help them transition. So we sort of work in with them. Guys like Richie and Dan, who, and I guess like Beaver and Izzy and those sort of guys that have got a profile, a lot of what their safety net will be trying to continue a lot of the commercial relationships they have, or broadcasting or whatever. Whereas some people, might want to go into the police, or, they want to buy a business, or, they just want to be at home with their kids for a couple of years while their wife goes out to work or whatever. Everyone's completely different, but, and that is the hard bit, because, some careers end abruptly through injury, or just because, a club's decided to go in a different path. They want youth or whatever. So you just have to have those questions as and when, and then react to the circumstances. Like, in some ways, guys like Richie and Dan, their ability to work off the pitch and just, be themselves effectively and do the commercial stuff is enhanced when they leave the jersey and rugby behind, because all of a sudden they've got 40 hours to kill a week. There's no competing sponsorship issues. They have sort of carte blanche to kind of do more if they want to do it. So it's just different for everyone. It's kind of not, and that's the reality of this business, is that every relationship's different. There's no textbook. There's no, like, I've done what I've done, and I think I wouldn't have lasted in this game if it didn't resonate with certain people. But my way's not the only way. I'm not Warren. Warren does it his way, and then Kent does it his way, and like Post and Dunk and other people from other organisations will do it their way, and they've been successful. So there's just no textbook, you just kind of, I guess you go back to that value set and, moral compass, and, you just got to do what you think's right in the moment, I think. I little catch cry, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. I think that's important, because you have a lot of really difficult conversations in this job, and even if the player's lucky enough, and it's not always, but often, you ride the high of doing a deal, closing a deal, they're super excited. There's still a really shitty phone call to make to tell somebody who has worked their butt off and put a whole lot of effort into getting money and presenting to the player or whatever, that sorry, he's not signing with you. So it's this game, it's often hard to really celebrate, because, and it's a small world. We negotiate with the same people, sustainable business practices, I suppose, and that's why it's not what you do, it's how you do it. You've got to be respectful and transparent, and you often like the person that you're dealing with, and to ring them up and tell them is not particularly nice. Or telling a player that, man, they don't, there's no future here for you, they've decided to go in a different direction or whatever, and that's where it gets tricky overseas as well, because there's so many different nuances that just make it. You could be the best player on the team, but if a new coach comes in and decides that he wants to play the game or she wants to play the game in a particular different way, that means that their profile of the team changes. It might mean they don't need a foreign hooker. They actually want a foreign centre. So, sorry, you're superfluous, or we'll pay you, but we're not going to pay you as much because we're not going to play you. There's all those sort of little bits that come into it that you just learn through experience, and they're they're the worst conversations, but you're not only here to tell them the good stuff, right? You've actually, and in some ways, your job is to think worst case, right? And when you get in real trouble is when it actually gets to worst case, and you're like, what are we going to do now? But
do you have a formula for those tough conversations? Is it just get straight to the point? Do you do small talk and then get to the point? Do you?
Some conversations are fairly short.
It's a no.
Yeah. You don't. No, there's no formula, because again, every conversation's different, right? And it's a live thing, and that's the cool thing about the job, I suppose, is that it is so relationship based, and it is talking to people who, generally you could be fighting, but you can talk about what happened on Saturday or what's going to happen on Saturday or whatever. There's that real sort of commonality that gives you something to talk about even in the awkward moments. So you might talk about that and then go, well,
by the way,
yeah.
You don't have to go into any specifics, but have you had cases of players coming to you post-career with a great idea and you've just looked at it and gone, what are you? Who's been in your ear about this? This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Nah.
Or is that not your role? Is that not your role to?
Oh no, I mean that not stupid. I mean, I think, and this is to potential employers out there for these guys, they professional rugby players have got, they've been through a lot, right? They've seen a lot of people, and you think about teams now, it's not just a couple of coaches and a manager, there's physios, doctors, you're going to have contact with all the marketing people, match day, all that sort of stuff. And they're massively high performance, imagine walking into work every Monday and you get reamed for how you've performed, or your best mate gets reamed for how they've performed, and they get dropped every week. No, we don't want you to work this week. You were shit on one day of last week. You prepared amazingly, but you're shit. Just don't do anything for us this week. That's a weird sort of place to be in. So they learn a lot, right? They're all quite savvy and they've got good influences around them and stuff. So I think, they've got good bullshit meters, I really do think most of them do. So, often we'll get something thrown at us and saying, oh, hey, can you just cast your eyes over this? Or, it might be a franchise agreement, or what do you think about this? And, none of I've never Some you go, oh, you might just want to be a little bit careful about this, but I don't think it's either where you're like, oh, you're an absolute idiot or anything like that. There are plenty of people who have lost some money, I'm sure, but no, I think, I don't think rugby players get enough credit for just how savvy and how sort of relevant what they've been through is in the business and employment world.
Is it hard post-career for a lot of rugby players?
Yep. Yeah, there is just so much to it, right? Like, you think about a rugby team, you've got all your mates, well, not all your mates, but you've got a whole lot of group of people around you, support network, you're going for coffees, you're doing whatever. You live in a really structured environment, day off a week, finished at 3, whatever. So then if you go to a job which is 9 to 5 or whatever, and you'll be earning significantly less than what you were, just having to deal with the pressure of that. Like, you used to always pick the kids up from school. Now you don't. You leave to work when it's dark. You get home when it's dark. How are you going to fit in your training? Because you want to, you've been used to looking a particular way and probably taking a lot of self-confidence from how you look or how much you can lift or anything like that. And so then you just throw these, it's not just you're not getting the outlet of playing rugby. You just think about the life changes and the family unit changes and everything that you have to explain you maybe explain to your kids or everything you have to deal with. I just don't think there's many situations like that you can really relate to in just the normal world. It is really unique, So that's why the Players Association, people put a whole lot of effort into trying to prepare people. But, you can, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
And at the other end of the spectrum, you're also dealing with the dreams and aspirations of young athletes, right? Do you have to do a lot of work in managing, I guess, for some people, family and the family's expectation that their kid will be providing for them in the long term, but that may not be a reality?
Yeah. I think there's a bit of that. But again, I think, most families are pretty good, and probably and this is a hot topic, but one of the, I guess, unintended consequences of sort of rugby players, sort of all good ones ending up at similar schools and stuff, is that, parent groups of those kids, they travel, they watch, whatever, and, the chatter happens amongst the parents, and this is what you need to look out for, and he's pretty good. Have you spoken to an agent yet? Or I saw you talking to that guy in the tracksuit from whichever union it is. You might just be a bit careful or whatever. So I think there's a lot before it even gets to us. I think there's, again, it's New Zealand, right? It's tiny. Everybody knows somebody. So there's a whole lot of education. I think it's got better and better as it's kind of, as the market has matured and, and the unions have matured and everything's matured. So I think the expectations are okay. But you do spend a lot of time talking with family as well, because I think, our approach anyway is that, we are only a part of their support network or their advisor network. Like they might have a first 15 coach that they're really tight with, or a, mum, dad, uncle, brother. Doesn't really matter. We are part of that. You don't want to, it's not like the movies where the agent comes in and divorces them away from their family. Like you are just part of it. So absolutely, and often because we're recruiting rugby players in their last year of school, so they're still at home. A lot of them are still at home or with caregivers or, hostels or whatever. So when you're pitching them and you're trying to get them on board, you are doing it, you're pitching the family often. Mums and dads have got good bullshit meters as well. So, that is absolutely 100% what you do.
I can already tell you're not the kind of guy who's going to want to big note or name drop, but I'm going to go fishing for a story which involves two of the biggest names.
Oh, no.
2019 Rugby World Cup final, and you are sandwiched in between Richie McCaw and Dan Carter. Is that a moment where you're kind of like, look at where I am, look at who I'm with? Do you remember this? It was fed to us by one of your sources, said that watching the final and they were sort of calling the game and could see what was going to happen.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So we watched it in the MasterCard box with Richie, Dan, and actually Jace Ryan was there, who, the Ford's coach. And yeah, that was pretty cool because it was South Africa, England. I think no one really cared about the result. So you could watch it with sort of, curiosity. And, Dan sitting there going, oh, watch this. If they set up like that, they're going to go this way. Or Dan yelling at Richie going, oh, wait, Skip, what are we doing here if they got a penalty? Are we points or are we whatever? Yeah. Like that was, I'd probably had too much to drink to sit there and go, did I reflect on it and go, this is pinch yourself moment. But, when you look back at the photos and Jason and I have actually talked about it a couple of times, he went from watching the final to being in the final, on the sidelines just Ryan a couple of years later. Like, yeah, they're the moments that you actually have to. And they'll come up when you're scrolling through your photo roll or you'll get a memory from a day or something like that. But yeah, that's pretty unique situation that you do have to pinch yourself a little bit and go, well, that's pretty cool. I'm pretty fortunate there.
You've dropped the name there. Oh, you've got to follow up? No, you've dropped the name there, Jace Ryan, which is an interesting one. Like his, from club footy all the way now to the All Blacks is incredible. But how do coaches, because you represent coaches as well, how do they differ from players and athletes?
They're older.
Aside from the obvious, but are there like contracts and fish hooks and things, their requirements very, very different to players?
Yeah, they are different. I'm just trying to sort of put it in words.
Because you live and die by your results as well, right?
Well, that's probably more like the reality is with coaching is there are way more coaches than there are opportunities for coaches, right? Like that's just, just is. It is to get to the top of the coaching pile or even to get to Super Rugby is hard. Like you have had to earn your stripes. You've had to prove yourself over and over and over in some way to get there. Players are sort of increasingly, because I go back to that point that, their experience in the environment does lend itself to coaching. And a lot of those guys probably have put their head down and thought, well, I want to be a coach. And they'll be having the chats with the head coaches and the other coaches and trying to learn and understand while they're still in the environment. And they might be given a little bit of responsibility here or there. Or when they're injured, they'll go in the box or whatever. But it is really hard to get there. So, and I think coaches are really, really conscious of that, the good ones, how hard it is. So, they want to be protected when they get their opportunity. They've also got to be a little bit careful around the opportunity they take. Like they don't want to pin their stripes to a head coach if they think that head coach isn't necessarily performing very well or they don't think they're going to advance their career. It's just, they're just different, I suppose.
But is that the way they have to operate now as a pack and as a group? Is that
coaches? No, not necessarily, but you do see it happen, right? Like I'll often ask coaches, one of the hard ones I think is if a head coach gets appointed and it's kind of like arranged marriage, right? Like, well, we've already got this assistant coach or these are all the assistant coaches. And, you might go, yep, that's cool. We get on really well and we've had a few meetings and it's fine. But if you're 0-3 for the season and you are in the trenches and you are fighting, is that relationship going to stand the test of time? And I think that's why you sort of do see coaches kind of cruise in packs a little bit because they just trust each other, And, rugby world, they talk a lot about cohesion now, which is, players, have played with each other a lot. The more cohesive the team, the better it is and all that sort of stuff. And coaches are probably no different. If there's certain areas that are important and you've got 100% trust in that person is going to cover them off because they've done it for you before and we've been through this and we've been through that, then that's going to be advantageous and, that's going to work better, I suppose.
When I spoke to a few friends of mine that know you, they said one of your genius zone is being able to take like a ton of information and really sort of cleanly articulate it and explain it. So I'm going to put it to
I've proved it wrong, haven't I, for the last hour?
So bear in mind, we're just going to spend a bit of time on this because I want to move to other sports, but I actually want to start with rugby and zooming right out. 2024, how is the professional game? How is the worldwide landscape?
Yeah. I think, like, the thing I'd keep reminding myself is that there's a whole lot of smart people that have taken big bets on rugby. You know, whether you like or don't like Silver Lake, CVC, which is the other big private equity party that's pumped a whole lot of money into other parts of the world. There are a whole lot of people that are betting on rugby, right? And they don't come into these things to lose money, right? So I think that overarching view is that, right, well, there is something here. And again, it's more just trying to work out the right way for it to grow. And again, I think what's happened is that with this private equity money coming in, with COVID, which again has challenged all these relationships and the normal ways of doing things and has caused some shuffles, you know, URC with the South Africans going up north to play, and Argentina, Higuaí's leaving Super Rugby and kind of all those sort of things, is that we're in a space where a whole lot of questions are being asked because people are coming in and demanding those questions are being asked. And like, rugby's not in the healthiest spot it's been, right? Like, there's no point hiding away from that. And I just think, like, they're talking a lot more about the rules of the game. How are we marketing it? Is it, you know, we're seeing teams fall over, which has just never happened before, but teams are well, it has happened, but not to this sort of level. So you can't sit there and say that that everything's right with the game, but I kind of feel like we're just in this situation where the private equity money's come in, people are sort of shoulders out a little bit, jostling for position, but we are going to come out the other side into a better spot once it kind of all settles down a little bit. And I think what we're seeing more and more and if I just look at New Zealand, is that people know stuff's wrong, right? And they are asking themselves the questions now, whereas I think for a long time people didn't want to face it. You know, oh no, we don't have a problem with this, or we don't have a problem with that. And they just wanted to sweep stuff under the carpet, where now those issues are being talked about. Like, we don't have the solutions yet, or we might, but no one's agreed on what the solution is yet. But, you know, it's in a precarious little spot around what is the world order going to be? What is it going to look like? And I think that, like, if you look at French rugby, that's on a high. Like, that is absolutely flying. The World Cup last year, top 14. You know, Japan rugby, that Japan Rugby League One, they have some natural advantages in the size of the cannons of the people that fund the game. But they're actually going really well. And, you know, Irish rugby, I bet you they're saying they're loving it. You know, it's just down in New Zealand, we just cannot seem to get ourselves out of the swamp, really. We just, you know, and it's tiring. It's boring. Like, it's just boring.
If there was one thing you could magically wave a brush at and fix, is there something that jumps out, like game day experience or the rules or the Super Rugby structure? Is there anything
during the day?
Yeah. See, even the fact that you can rattle off four like that straight away. All of them, but I do think match day experience is a massive one, and it kind of feeds a little bit into the rules and all that sort of stuff. Like, I think we keep telling people that rugby's broken because we keep talking about the rules. I actually think, and I guess I'm probably not the best person to judge this, but I actually think rugby's pretty easy to watch, and I ref kids rugby and, you know, reffing the breakdown and that sort of stuff. I actually think they've cleaned it up massively, but we keep telling people it's wrong. We keep telling people it's dirty because we keep wanting to sending more people off. We keep wanting to talk about HIAs, which are incredibly important. Don't get me wrong. Like, HIA, I think, is really important, but the disciplinary stuff, what we keep telling people is wrong. When the match day experience is what people come back for. Like, if I go and watch a game in France, and I'm incredibly lucky to get to travel around the world and watch rugby. If I go to a game in France, the feeling I get sitting down in Pau at their stadium is the feeling I get when I'm at North Shore Rugby, watching North Shore play East Coast Bays or Takapuna, like, and there's 14,000 people in France, and there's probably, and North Shore's a well-supported club, we've probably got 1,000, 1,500, but that's the feel you get. You get that feel that the people are down here because it's their community, and there's kids everywhere, and they leave people in the ground. There's bands afterwards. There's stuff to do beforehand. The players are mingling. It's got that real community feel. We're over here, we just don't do that, right? Like, and
shuffled out by red badge security 10 minutes after the game.
And the venues are a large issue, you know. I really do think they are, but they're also a necessary part because New Zealand's such a small place that it's not really feasible for people to own their own stadium and not have complete control over the matchday experience. But we've got to do something about that whole experience around getting the kids back playing in the day. Is, you know, like, I think the Hurricanes have chosen to play at 4:35, which is that's a big step, I think, and it'd be really interesting to be a fly on the wall and see what Sky think about that, because 7:30 rates a hell of a lot better than 4:30 for them. But
it's 20,000 pre-sale.
Yeah, but the fans want it,
yeah,
right? But that's also, there's a disconnect there between what Sky want and what the Super Rugby teams want, because the Super Rugby teams, the way they make money is by getting people through the gates. They still get funded through the broadcast, but that's through an intermediary in NZR who sort of push the money onto them. So I don't think they feel that direct relationship. So that's a huge one. But I think, and then, so because we're small and the venues are owned by the city or whatever, I also think if you compare it to sports overseas, like if I think about NBA, we don't have those symbiotic relationships between the city councils and security and police and all that sort of stuff and the teams that they do. Like NBA look at like the experience. Their experience is you leave your house, right? Mm-hmm. That's what they're tracking. They want to see
driveway to driveway, right?
Yeah, driveway to driveway. How long does it take to get in? How long does it take you to get into the ground? How long does it take you to get a hot dog in your hand or a beer or whatever and get home? We are so compartmentalized, right? Like we cannot work together. Like it, you know, sometimes when you go to Eden Park, and this is probably the same stadium, I'm just picking on Eden Park because I live in Auckland, you kind of don't feel very welcome, right? Like you feel like you are an annoyance to them. And they're trying hard, you know, I know they're trying hard, but there's not a lot. The Blues are just a tenant there. Like there's not a lot they can do. And, you know, the security people, you know, they want to be there at 10 o'clock. You know, their job finishes at 10. They don't want you there after 10 or whatever. They're just like, mate, get home. Like, I don't like rugby. Yeah. I don't want it. Like World Cup final 2020, the women's one, whatever it was, 22, was it? So we watched it up in a box, and it was our box, and the kids wanted to go down onto the field, you know, and hang with the players and all that sort of stuff. And through, you know, my wife, who was Blackfin and works in New Zealand Rugby, you know, they know a lot of the players and stuff. So it was awesome for them. We got kicked out of the box. And I'm like, but this is where the kids need to come back to. Mm. And they're like, well, has she got a phone? You know, I think my daughter's 9 at the time. And I'm like, well, yes, she does. But what if she didn't? Yeah. You know, like, and they're like, we won't drink. Like, if it's a licensing, that's fine. Take all the booze. We've got no problem. But I can't leave my kids. But it's just like, beat it, you know? And you're just sitting there going, this is a group of people that are sitting in a box celebrating, you know, an amazing occasion, amazing game, and we're just getting shooed out of a venue. Whereas you go to Montpellier or wherever else, and you are there 5 hours after the game, and there's still barbecues going, and there's bands going, and there's kids doing whatever. Like, I don't get it, you know, and traffic's such a problem. Well, why don't you keep people in the venue for a bit longer and sort of bleed the traffic out? Like, let's just think differently. And I think that's one of the, like, everyone's looking for problems. Sorry, everyone's talking about problems, but in terms of the solutions, nobody's really prepared to do anything particularly different or radical. And I don't know if that's because the structures or whatever just don't let us, but you know, we need to do things differently if we're going to change. Like, if you keep doing the same things, you don't change. So
some good lessons.
So there was no coherency about
no, there was
whatsoever.
There's a lot of good points, mate.
Well, there's some good points for Auckland FC, the new football team coming in to try and change that matchday experience as well, right?
Yeah, but like, I'm not I don't get out to the Warriors very often, but they seem to have cracked the code, right? Like people want to go, people want to be there. It's got that tribalism. It's got that sort of fabric. And I think AFC will have a big opportunity there because there'll be a lot of curious people. It's just then converting the curious into diehard, right? And that's where the Phoenix have probably lost it a little bit. They had a really good following, and I'm getting into football, which I don't know anything about. But
There's still time for Halo to open that football,
they haven't
that football division.
They haven't cracked it, right? Well, they had it and then they've lost it a little bit, So I think AFC have got a big opportunity there to really try to grasp a foothold in here.
No interest in league, just while you've spoken about the Warriors, like from a representation point of view?
Yep, we've got a guy that's accredited with rugby league, but I think to have rugby league properly, you have to have an Australian offering. Every year on the strategy document, rugby league's got a question mark next to it. When are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? But I think you need a whole lot of knowledge, which you probably have to buy, acquisition, and it's got to be Australian sort of based because that's where the clubs are really.
Right, is rugby in league done? Cricket.
Yep.
So I'd heard that, despite all your sort of your breadth of knowledge in rugby, it's actually kind of your third sport. It's like golf and cricket, and one of those two is what you know the best or what you love the most. I'm really interested in sort of IPL space in cricket because I only found out during the week through research that that's on track to be, is it the second biggest league in the world by 2030?
Yeah, I think that's when you value the value of the franchises, right? Like, so I think one sold the other, and I don't have the numbers, but one sold the other day for like a new franchise sold for 800 million or something like that. Or it might have been a billion. I can't remember. And then if you value them all and you add them all up, like that's where that valuation comes from. Is this the value of the franchises? Yeah, like it's huge, right? Like IPL is just going to continue to grow and grow. And whether that's grow in terms of the competition getting longer, or it's going to grow in terms of its influence around the world. Like you had the Sunrisers Eastern Cape or something like that in South Africa, and whether those franchises, because if they're valued that much, they've got a lot of money equity to sit around and play with. So they are investing in teams around the world. So, they are just a bit like City Football Group and those sort of groups. You're going to, that's where it's heading.
So there's this huge pot of money and opportunity, and then we've got the sort of the test summers, and there's low crowds and things. What's your vision? What do you think New Zealand cricket needs to do? Do we need to go towards the IPL? Is that
New Zealand cricket does pretty much, in that if you're a New Zealand cricketer, cricket contracted cricketer, I think there's 20 contracts, you have to be available for New Zealand other than during the IPL, right? Like they specifically carve it out because the rewards on offer, they just can't match. And that's why kind of like, like rugby has its Northern Hemisphere release periods where you have to let people go and play international. You have the international windows in soccer. Cricket has the IPL window that people go and play, and most sort of cricket boards around the world carve out that period to let them go and do that because New Zealand needs it, right? Like if they can't, if Kane Williams is getting $1 million, Kane Williamson's getting $1 million US to play, for 2 months, versus what he's getting here, which he still gets paid very well here, but you can't deny people. When I'm an athlete, sort of, I got my athlete hat on, I suppose. You can't deny people that opportunity. And because if you did, they'd probably say, well, thanks. Or at some point they would, like the people want to, I think most kids grow up wanting to represent their country. It doesn't matter what sport they play in. The thought of pulling on the fern or whatever will have an influence on what they do. So you're always going to keep people for a certain point, but then at some point, if the rewards are greater, you're just going to go, well, I'm just going to go and do that.
Do you do everything with Kane Williamson?
No, we've done some commercial work with Kane.
Oh, commercial. Yeah.
Where do cricket players fit in terms of representation?
Yeah, interesting. So a lot of them have agents now overseas, but so in New Zealand, the way the contracting system works is you have you got your 6 major associations, and then you have your New Zealand contracted list. So New Zealand will allocate 20 contracts, and they're ranked 1 to 20, and number 1's worth X, and number 2's worth why, and on and on and on. And so there's a kind of like a process and formula that sort of works out, try to make it objective as possible, which works out where you are. And then the exact same thing happens down at major association level. So there's no negotiation. Like if somebody wants to change major associations, the only thing you can really horse trade with is a ranking. Well, if you're ranked 10 at Auckland, we'll rank you 3 at Canterbury or whatever. So there's no real negotiation. So, there isn't a market, I suppose. Agents have job when there's a market, and there's no real market. There is a bit of a market in overseas, and particularly with the sort of, all the new leagues popping up. But a lot of them are done by auction. So some guys will go, well, if it's an auction, you're not really negotiating. I'm just going to get what people say. So yeah, it's not, cricket agency is not something we used to do it back in the early days of IPL, but then it's kind of something we haven't really focused on because it's just, there's no real need for it down here.
Overall, though, cricket in a good space.
Well, globally, I think yes. But most of that's just fueled off the back of India. The big issue cricket's got is that it's just the power. Is in India, England, and Australia, the big three. That's where the majority of the money's made. They're the ones that have the most money, and that's so they're in India and the subcontinent. They're driving huge amounts of revenue. The hard thing is for the New Zealands, the West Indies, South Africas. Everyone's sort of keeping up. And if you use a rugby analogy, I kind of think we're like Scotland when it comes to cricket. If you think rugby, if you think where Scotland is in the pecking order of world rugby, we're kind of Scotland when it comes to cricket.
Yeah.
So, I know Scott Wiener, CEO, and Diana at the chair of New Zealand Cricket, and they work tirelessly to make sure that New Zealand has an outsized influence on the global game because they have to. They've got to stay relevant, and that's what I know that's what they're constantly thinking about. So.
You've got a wealth of sporting IP in your head.
Yep.
Have you ever thought about crossing over to an NSO or a sporting organisation and shifting into that space?
Not right now. Oh, yeah. I think you sit there and like everyone does, what are you going to do next or whatever. And I think there's certainly an element of me that sits there and goes, whether they've asked for it or not, I've probably told a whole lot of people what they should be doing and stuff. And there's a little bit of me that sometimes says, oh, well, if you think you can do it, go and prove it. But yeah, not on the immediate horizon.
And then if New Zealand cricket is Scotland in rugby terms, what is New Zealand football in rugby terms?
I'm not a football expert.
Okay.
Where are we ranked?
The hundreds.
Yeah, 100 and something. But like I look at someone like Chris Wood, do we as Kiwi sports fans really appreciate what he is doing in the world of football in the Premier League?
I think the people that care about football do. I think like if I know who Chris Wood is and I know he's just had a record-breaking season, I think he's got a lot of goals. And if I know that, who I'm a casual football observer, I follow the sports news, then the people that really want to know that will know that intimately, I think football's a funny one, right? Like it's a funny sport in New Zealand in that we've got New Zealand football, we've got massive participation at the youth, and then we just seem to die in a ditch after that. I know that there are some pockets of strong clubs, but we've never really managed to get the parochialism of the NPC in rugby. Like I used to watch Napier City Rovers growing up. Like I have great memories of Park Island, and I couldn't name a player or whatever, but I knew that there were 5,000-10,000 people there, and it was a great day out. But I just don't think it's ever sort of really grabbed that. And I think a lot of that is around the fact that it's just so focused around Premier League, La Liga. Like there's so much other football that is just so much no disrespect to the people that are giving their guts here, but it's just so much better than what we can put on offer here.
You're right. It's like you look at these other sports and you're watching Super Rugby, you're watching the best players in the world. You're watching the Warriors, you're watching NRL, it's the best in the world. Cricket, it's the best in the world. You're watching professional football here, it's like the 12th level of football compared to what you see on TV, Champions League and English Premier League and La Liga. Like it's so far removed from what you know as the premium product that unless it's a really captivating match day experience, then, are you going to go?
Yeah. But see, I think basketball, I think basketball are doing a really good job in that space and sort of creating competition and creating enough interest and stuff to really sort of carve out a niche following in New Zealand, even though they've got the NBA and we've got the Breakers. I think they're really smart around when they play it. They flood TV with it. It seems quite exciting. And Sky have obviously got some interests in the competition, so they want to pump it. But I kind of feel like basketball's sort of doing that a bit.
Yeah, it's good.
Taking a little bit of that space.
Yeah, I clocked a game on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And it was like North Shore Event Centre, and it was rammed.
Yeah.
And I thought, shit, there's a real subculture of people that are dialed into this, and it's live on free-to-air Sky Open or whatever it is on a Sunday afternoon. Perfect time for
I don't
viewing.
think you can turn on Sky and not have a basketball game somewhere on their I'm still old school. I use the remote.
Yeah.
I'm not a streamer yet for that. There's somewhere you'll find basketball. Yeah, they're doing a good job.
Keen to move from sport to your wife.
Yep.
World champion. You married into a...
She's the impressive one.
She's the impressive one. Yeah, I'd heard that from a few people. That she was better at rugby than you are.
Significantly.
Can you tell us when you first met Hannah and how that got off the ground?
Typical, probably Dunedin relationship. Met her at the pub one night. And like literally, met her at the pub, went on a few dates, and then, I was just leaving. I was working for Warren at the time, and we were leaving. I was leaving Dunedin because I was going up to work in Wellington for a bit at Belgully, and Hannah was moving back to Auckland, and we kind of, the first few years we were together, she was chasing her dream with rugby. I went overseas and played a bit, and we lived apart, but we, I don't know, we hit it off straight away. It's just your typical story. And, we got two beautiful children now. She's high performance manager for the women. So she sits atop the 7s and the 15s, the Black Ferns, 7s and 15s. 5 World Cups. I think she's won either as a player or a manager or a campaign manager or whatever. So, she is the impressive one. And she manages, because I'm pretty useless, and she keeps everything ticking over at home. Yeah.
Do you compare? Like, do you pass notes to one another about your respective industries of how you could improve and where you could be better? Because you're like a real power couple, right? Like genuinely, in terms of a rugby situation, you're pretty high powered.
Yep. We try to keep it pretty separate. Like genuinely, rugby's her life, rugby's my life. But like what I said before, it's not like we sit around the dinner table talking rugby a heck of a lot. Like we kind of avoid. But we have some pretty interesting discussions and have different viewpoints around what's going on. So we'll tease some stuff out. But we got to be a bit careful, right? Like I've got to make sure I walk to the other end of the house. Sometimes if I hear who she's on the phone with, I'm like, I just don't want to be part of it, right? I don't. It's just some things you'd just rather not know. So I'll get out, and I think she's pretty much the same as well.
So we went to Mel Robinson in the lead up to this one, and I'll be honest with you, she came in hot.
Just for context, she emceed your wedding, right?
Yeah, she emceed my wedding.
So she's a friend of the both of you for a long time. So it's a familiar-ish relationship.
Most of the time she's a friend to me. She's a friend to Hannah all the time.
So Mel came in hot with her voice notes. One of them we're not going to read, but she did say your party trick was a red line from Dunedin.
What is a red line?
Red line, Steinlager Classic bottle.
So it's the same as a black line with a Heineken.
Yeah, so you're just trying to finish the first go, finish it in the red line.
Yeah. I think she must have thought we would be drinking during this one.
I prefer the stuff she said about the huge penis. One of the other things, just while we're still on the relationship with Hannah, is that you were an early champion of women's sport before it became a thing now.
Yep.
Like, where are we at now compared to where we were? Obviously, things are a lot closer, but I read a great piece of yours about investment parity rather than pay parity.
Yep.
Can you expand on that idea?
Yeah, I think like with Han and growing up, and Hannah and all the other trailblazers, Anna Richards and Melody Robinson, and I forget too many, sorry, ladies. But when you're living with them and you're breathing them and you're seeing them, professionalism, we just go straight to dollars, right? But you can be professional without getting paid, right? Like what those girls had to do and the sacrifices they had to make and how hard they trained, and they weren't doing anything less than anyone, but they weren't getting the eyeballs, they weren't getting the coverage, they weren't getting the kudos. Did they care? Probably a little bit, but it didn't matter. They still did it. They strapped on the fern, they went out and they won World Cups for their country. So seeing where it's kind of got to now is awesome. Right, like it's. I think people are starting to take it seriously. It's in the consciousness. It's in the news, but we're still way behind in terms of the investment. And there's still people out there, the naysayers. You see anything on social media, the comments, oh, but do they pay for themselves? Do they do whatever? No, they don't. Of course they don't. But Sevens has never paid for itself. But New Zealand Rugby has been more than happy to pour millions of dollars into a Sevens program because it would grow the game globally. So with women's sport, if you don't fertilise something, you don't give it care and attention, it's never going to grow. So you just have to invest in it. And it is a time lag. And time lag, I mean, like you can't just go, oh, well, we've tried for 2 years and that's it. It's over. You've actually got to give it time to grow. Give it time, like we talked about AFC. Give it time to grab that attention and that consciousness and work hard to bring big events to New Zealand. You can't be what you can't see. Like put it in prime time. Nobody will turn up and watch the test match. Well, if you keep putting it at 2:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, nobody will come. Why don't you play All Black tests then? Oh, no one will come. Well, why would you play a Black Ferns test? It's just those kind of little things that I think you just have to keep fighting on. And I think, one of the things I do talk to my wife a lot about is this, they're still in the fight. There's still so much further for them, for women's sport and for us all to get there. And I just think I got a daughter, 12, she dreams of being a professional sports person. Why would you want your daughter to have any different opportunities than your son? Like if anybody can answer that and say, well, they shouldn't because they were born without a dangly bit, it's just like, wow, that's just ridiculous. Why wouldn't we want to fight for it? And we go back to all the troubles that rugby's had in sport, etc. It's a growth area. Why wouldn't you want to go out and try to get 50% of the population interested in it to make up for the just changes in demographic or different alternatives or whatever? Why wouldn't you? Like it's not all altruistic. Like I just genuinely think there's a commercial opportunity at some point that's going to crack and it's going to land, and you have to do it. You have to chase them.
Yeah. What did you see commercially after the Ferns won the World Cup in 2022? It seemed like there was this huge boost in interest and a lot of those sort of headline players. Has that maintained?
No, I don't think it has. I don't think we did enough to jump off the back of that. Like Opiki, which was a great idea and great in concept, but who championed it? Did the Super Rugby teams champion it? They might say they did, but did they really? Did Sky champion it? Like, what was the launch like? What was, when was it played? Where was it played? I just don't think they jumped on that enough. And then the other really hard thing, and we're just talking really specifically about rugby here, is that rugby can't exist in a vacuum, right? Like it's tiny globally against sport. So you are so codependent on what's happening in other parts of the world. So like Canada are really good. They beat us for the first time the other day. That wasn't an enjoyable watching experience when you're with your wife when that happens. I can assure you of that. But no match day experience would have made that any good. But the Canadian Rugby Union is they're getting by on the smell of an oily rag. We need to play more tests against them. Well, how? Who's paying for it? How do you do it? And does New Zealand and England and those sort of unions that probably have the ability to invest more, do they have to do it for everyone? Or should it come from World Rugby or whatever? It just gets really complicated, but it can't just be seen in isolation down here. Or like with Opiki, well, the Australian team should be in it, right? Like it would be great if they could from a fan point of view. But just think about the costs involved in that and the costs for the girls, because not all the girls are contracted. They get contracted for a small window. If you extended that out by 10 weeks, could they still hold down their teaching job? Could they, could they do the university? Could they do whatever? Or how are we going to recompense them for that? Like, there's just so many things that flow when you actually get into the bricks and mortar of professional sport or building competition or running a sport that it's just not simple. But money funds ambition, right? You can't do anything without money in this world. So the more money that comes in, the more problems you can solve. It's as simple as that.
Mm. Do New Zealand Rugby, have you got a good line of communication with them? Like, do they ask you for what you think on these issues and topics?
Yep, sometimes. I've been to a few symposiums where they'll call different people in from different areas, and yeah.
You've got such a strong voice, right? Because you're so connected to the players.
I think in certain areas they'll ask around what's happening around the world, or they'll ask my view about certain things, but yes, I think the answer to that is a simple yes. They would. If they thought I could add value, and I'd be happy to, right? Because, I think it's never, well, sometimes it's us, them in terms of a very specific negotiation, but, we've got a part to play in rugby and making sure that it stays relevant and making sure that it grows and all that sort of stuff. Like, I remind the team of that all the time, if we just let rugby die on a vine, we're out of jobs, right? So we actually, the old, I hate the saying, but are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution type thing, So, we need to do our bit. And so, always happy to offer an opinion or whatever on it if it's required. And, and that's across the team. Like, we have so many touch points with Super Rugby teams or New Zealand Rugby or whatever. Our whole team will be, imparting their views on this whenever they get the opportunity.
Just before Shay wraps us up, what's the relationship like with media from your end? Like, when you're in these tense contract negotiations and there's like a leak or something, are you trying to figure out where it's coming from? Does that bother you?
Used to. It did really used to bother me, and sometimes it gets in the way of the negotiation, right? So that you can be annoyed. But I guess for a couple of reasons. One, they're just doing their job. At the end of the day, it's their job to find stuff out and report it if they think it's in the public interest. So it's never personal or anything like that. It's their job, and if they do their job well and they get the information, then, well, good on them, I suppose. So I don't worry too much. But then, going back to that point we just talked about, rugby needs more chatter, right? Rugby needs more talking points other than just what's happening in the game. It needs more noise. It needs more energy. It needs sort of, I call it the chatter outside the game. And so you got to take the good with the bad in that. Like, you can't have everything rosy, or you can't have everything. You can't control the narrative all the time. What you're actually doing is trying to create a product that creates multiple narratives that you want the media invested in to try to find and talk about, which then gives the people in the pubs to talk about things. Like, if you look at game of league happens, there's 7 or 8 narratives because there's so much media and they're looking about it, and you can scroll through the papers and read all sorts of different stories. We just don't have that in New Zealand sport at the moment. I think that's one of the big issues about rugby and everything, is that the New Zealand sports media is really being challenged. I suppose you guys will know more about this, but it's being really challenged, and that's not producing the same number of column inches and words and all that sort of stuff. So, if a story breaks, well, I actually, there's part of me that goes, yeah, cool, it's going to give people something to talk about, and it's not just the game, it's something different, and we need to encourage more of that somehow. I don't know the answers, but I don't think that you can begrudge it.
Yeah.
I'm back on my CV building
Yeah.
hunt here. There is a difference between an agent and a manager, right? A player agent and a player manager.
Yeah, I'd say so. So Dean Hegan, who we've talked about a couple of times, he's probably more a manager, right? And we've got Greg Dyer and Nicole Antonelli in the team who I would put in that space. So they kind of manage athletes. So an agent, we do the deals, do their rugby deals, help them with their rugby career, etc. The managers are kind of running their calendars, making sure they're turning up, doing the sponsor endorsements, checking the copy on the photos or making sure they're giving them ideas around how to do a social piece or whatever. So they're probably taking more of a manager's role around them. And whereas, the rugby agents are just kind of doing the rugby deal. I mean, the terms are pretty interchangeable, really, but if I had to, that's how I'd distinguish between them.
So then who makes the decision to put Stephen Donald on The Masked Singer?
He did.
And who didn't advise him not to do that?
I may have suggested that I wasn't sure whether he would actually want to do that or not. Yeah, that was a beauty, wasn't it, actually? What I did try to do is get the mower. I was like, as part of it, no, they wouldn't give it. They wouldn't.
But do you have that influence in terms of the negotiation of the deal?
I tried,
but only if he's the mower.
I tried, and they just wouldn't give it to us. I'm like, well, can we at least, so that we could just troll them every time we possibly could and pull it out.
For those who didn't watch The Masked Singer, was it not a great experience?
I've never watched it.
No, it was fine.
Yeah.
It was fine. It's just if Stephen dropped that, Stephen had some buyer's regret, I think, on doing that before he did it. I think afterwards he didn't care, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things that's kind of like, I agree to do it. Yep, sweet, well, they're going to pay me. Oh, that sounds all right. How hard can it be? And then I think it was like, oh, crikey, actually a hell of a lot harder than I thought
we've spoken to some other people that were on that show that were like, it was really intense in terms of like smuggle you into the studio.
Like you have it, couldn't it?
Yeah,
like you have it, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, well, we had a few meetings in it. I think, was it Warner Brothers that did it and stuff? And he had to park in the downstairs, put his hoodie on, glasses. Like you couldn't even show the people in Warner Brothers who you were. Yeah, like it was, I forgot about that. That was a beauty.
That's a hell of an NDA. Just on contract negotiations for small screen as well, good authority that you had a very hands-on approach to how you were represented in The Kick. Is that true?
Yeah, tell us that one.
Absolutely not.
The actor had to have the perfect golf swing to mimic your
didn't.
real life.
No, I did suggest that there should be some golf involved, but last script I got, and I got Promise Philip Smith about this. The last script I saw, the scene where I was introduced, I was on the barbecue, kids around me, hectic Sunday morning, whatever. The reality was I was on a white leather couch in a deep V Christ Redeemer T-shirt, watching the test match by myself, buffaloing Stella Artois. And that was the bit that got me. I was in Rarotonga when it came up. I'm just turning off my phone. Turned off my phone, woke up, and it just went bang. And all it was nice leather couch, buffalo, yada, 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 yada. So, no, that was...
So, again, to fill the backstory.
Yeah, the story I had heard is that you were adamant that the actor representing you in the movie had to have a good golf swing, and you offered to pay to get a stunt double if needed because it was of that much importance to you.
I am sure I probably did comment that they had to have a reasonably good golf swing. I wouldn't have offered to pay to do it.
But is that something? Sorry, does that something that come across your desk as well as the representatives of Stephen Donald?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. We did. I mean, they can do it without them, right? But Phil Smith's great guy, and he came and said, we've got this concept and. It would be way better if Stephen can be part of it. And so, we've done a few sort of movies or whatever, and they're pretty unique, different sort of scenarios to go through the whole funding mechanisms and what you're actually looking at and looking at scripts. Do a lot of reading books to screen them to make sure that there's nothing in there that
of course
that shouldn't be there, or that they might want to think about. But that was the first one we did, and we learnt a bit.
Richie McCaw and Beats by Dre, did that come through you guys?
That
as
was
well?
Dino. Yep. Dean Hegan did that. That was cool. I wasn't down at the shoot. Dean always takes those sort of lovely trips. It's amazing how many trips he gets to go away to these amazing places and stuff. But that was pretty cool. They had 2 helicopters, like full production, and the output of that was pretty awesome.
So it's far more than just contracts and I's and T's, isn't it? Like even just in that 3-minute exchange.
Every day must be so different.
Well, they are, there's a degree of same, but everything is different. Like the product of the discussion or the negotiation is often the same, and that it's a signed contract and somebody's agreed to play rugby for someone. But the journey and how you get there is just so different. Like, and every day I sort of think, oh, well, I've seen it all. I've been doing this 20 years or whatever. I've seen it all. You're always surprised. Sometimes it's a good surprise. Sometimes it's not such a good surprise. But everything is different. But that's humans are different, right? And everyone's just a bit different. So
it's such a unique job. You've got like how many professional agents would there be in New Zealand?
Well, in the rugby space, I think there are 12 accredited agents, and I would say just over half of them are full time.
Right. So you probably get this a lot, but do you get people saying, I want to do what you do? And and you say, well, okay, chances are you're not going to be able to do what I do.
Don't try to crush dreams.
Very careful with you.
You do. And I really respect someone that's got the courage to reach out and ask for a coffee or a Zoom or whatever. It tends to be sort of young people that are heading off to university, who might be friends of, sons or daughters of friends or whatever, who, are trying to figure out what to take. And I really want to get in the sports industry. So should I do a law degree or should I do finance or marketing or whatever? And then you'll get the people at the other end who, might be 3 or 4 years into a career and just want to sort of change and have an interest in sport or whatever. And we're always pretty, when I say we, I mean the team are always pretty good at if somebody sends an email through, we'll always reply. If we can make time, we'll sit down and have a yarn with them. And this is, and I mean, that's kind of cuts both ways a little bit, because like if we need a new person, I'm not putting an ad in the paper, because you sift through the applications and all that sort of stuff. So there's always a reason to go and sit down with people who are interested and see where they're at. And there is a list of people that are kept there that, one day if we needed something in particular, you might go knocking on the door and, there'd be a few doors you'd knock on to, hey, let's pick up that conversation and see where you're at.
One of those youngsters can slip under your wing the same way you did under Warren.
Yeah, exactly.
Opening a door for someone.
And that's probably one of the most frustrating things is we get a lot of applications for interns and all that sort of stuff, but it's just a really hard industry to be able to give a worthwhile experience to, because of the confidential and sensitive nature. Like if you're sitting there talking about a contract, here's work experience guy, it's not going to work, and that I particularly because law is the complete opposite, right? Like you have to do your clerkship, you sort of have to really work your way up and all that sort of stuff. So I wish we could do more of that stuff. But we just can't really.
So if you were a 42-year-old looking to be taken under the wing of New Zealand's one of New Zealand's top
podcast guy now,
top agents, and you had a podcast business on the side, what sort of attributes would you need to be successful in your business?
I genuinely think the biggest one's empathy.
Yes.
You need empathy in this, because you need to relate to people. Right, you need to understand what you're going through, and even that's in negotiation. I think you need to know people. You need to know their cues. You need to be able to walk in people's shoes. You really need to think objectively, because if you, like any negotiation, if you come in from one side and you haven't thought about some of the arguments that are going to come against you or the way they're going to see it or whatever, you're going to really struggle. You got to have thick skin. Like a lot of the people that come and ask how to be an agent, it's like, go and get some scars. I don't care what you do. Just go and get beaten up, get some black eyes, get some blood noses out in the real world, get some life experience, because how do you expect to people to trust you, and how do you expect to be able to give advice if you haven't actually lived and been through some stuff yourself? I don't really know what it is. You got to have the courage of your convictions, and I guess that's a little bit of thick skin. Like I said before, you can't choose your battles in this. Like you have to stand up every time, right? And you got to have awkward conversations, and you just got to have that view that what I'm arguing for is right, and even if you don't believe it's right, sometimes you have to argue it because that's your job. So, you've got to really be quite strong and strong-willed and, have that desire to fight when you need to, I suppose.
We've got a mate, Sean Goldsberry, who said in any negotiation, you never put the first number down. Does that reign true?
We hate putting a number down first, but now I've just given that away.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Business is in trouble.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good.
No, well, you do, right? Like, that's the hardest thing. Closing a deal is just anxious because have you left money on the table? And particularly it's not, like, I'm a terrible negotiator for myself, but when it's somebody else, like, I care, like, right? You don't want to leave anything on the table, so that's why you never want to go first.
Yeah, good. Good tips.
That's been epic, man. I've just been transfixed. Like, I know we've covered a lot of ground, but some really good stuff. I will just say before we do wrap up, now that we've had you on, you're kind of the gateway to your book. So we're coming after everyone on there. Willie Apiata.
Good luck. Again, call Warren every day for the next 365 days.
That's the plan. Hey, no, thank you so much for
worries.
coming in and sharing your time and sharing so much of you. I think it's been a really cool and interesting chat. Pal.
Yeah, fanboy. Like, it's been fascinating just to understand the mechanics, and I think all of the parts that you don't see as a punter, as a fan, around the headlines of they've renegotiated, they're going to leave the country, to realise that there's someone advocating for them on their behalf, but who's also got a 360 view of all of the parties in the equation. I think it's also, I'll give you a bouquet here as well. Like, when we did look for research avenues, you gave us the full gambit of talk to these people because I work for them, talk to these people because I work with them, and talk to these people because they're in my corner as well. So it was, it's awesome, and it's exactly what you spoke about being really considered about everything involved in the deal.
No worries. It was much more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be.
Here we go. Good last words.
No, thanks, fellas. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers, Simon.